Hi everyone, Peter Giannatos here with the Charlotte Chess Center. Sorry we've been sort of busy recently with different things going on and we haven't really uploaded anything since the Norm tournament. I hope you enjoyed those interviews. I do want to get back to making videos as promised for different rating ranges, rating from 1,000 to 2,000. So I already put a video out quite some time ago in the rating range 1,000 to 1,300, and that was on open files. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to use club members' games as instructional models for those different rating ranges, so you can have an idea of what to expect if you're playing in a tournament and you're facing, let's say, a 1,400 or 1,700 or whatever. Because I'm going to be using real games from that are played here at the Charlotte Chess Center. So this game was given to me by Sampath Kumar this past week, who's playing the black pieces in this game. I thought it was a nice display, a nice attacking display toward the end, and even positionally in the game, I thought he played more sensibly than let's say his opponent in this game. And Phillip Miller, who's playing white, is a good player, 1,500 rated player. And he's actually coming off a long sort of hiatus from chess because he had a kid and everything. So anyway, the game began with the move knight to f3, and that's a pretty flexible first move. From here, white could follow up with c4, the English opening, or d4, going into more even queen's gambit territory, depending on what black does here. So knight f3 is a very flexible move. Sam played d5, which is a very good move. It sort of takes advantage of the knight f3 move order, because, for example, black could play the waiting game and go knight f6 and sort of see what setup white's going to choose. Again, white could go pawn c4, white could go d4, white could not put any pawns in the middle and go g3. I mean, there's so many different ways of playing here. The move knight f3 surely doesn't hurt white's position in any way. But after d5, Phil played c4. And this is a form of a ready opening. It really depends on how black follows up, because it could channel back into queen's gambit territory. So here Sam played e6, which is a queen's gambit declined setup. d4 here would be the proper queen's gambit. And so here I think Phil already made a minor mistake. He traded this c pawn for the d pawn, which is generally speaking, it's okay. I mean, you're trading your side pawn, let's say, for a center pawn. The problem is you're releasing any possible tension from the position. I think most strong players here, they leave this tension because they realize that, well, they're not losing their pawn on c4, because, for example, on this turn, black could have captured that pawn on c4, and if white is in a rush to capture it back, he could even go queen to a4 check and pick up that pawn. So I don't think white should trade here, because assuming black isn't going to take that pawn, which is probably a good assumption at this point, because he didn't take it the first time it was offered, and seeing that you can just get the pawn back, I think it's always sort of a good thing to maintain central pawn tension. I think that's something a lot of different instructors talk about, and I think that that's an important thing. So maintaining tension. I think giving it up here pretty much throws away any advantage that white could have possibly had in the opening. I think ready players may go b3 and try to fianchetto on the king side. I think the very main move here is to go d4, and that gets back into a queen's gambit setup. And a lot of players play g3 here, and that's how you would normally see a player who plays this move order play this position and go more into the Catalan waters. Bishop to g2, castle, and even if they gambit that pawn, this bishop on g2 is bishop on g2 would exert a lot of pressure on the b pawn, so and the queen side. So I don't like the trade there. I think that's already a minor mistake, and then to follow up with d3, really not claiming any share of the center. I don't really like this approach by white. I think white should still go d4 here, stake some claim in the center, and then and just develop. And this is actually a Queen's Gambit declined exchange variation, but not exactly a great version for white because black hasn't really committed his pieces anywhere. So black can play pretty flexibly here. C6, bishop to d6, try to get bishop to f5 in. All pieces seem to be able to develop quite naturally for black. So no real pressure on black because of that early exchange. So d3, knight to f6, a very sensible move. Knight to c3, also sensible. Bishop to e7, and then pawn g3. I mean, given that he played d3, it makes sense to put the bishop on g2 because these pawns obstruct the bishop on that diagonal. So I think this is all relatively normal here. Bishop to g4, developing pieces, and also threatening to break white's structure if black is allowed another turn. I mean, I know I would play bishop takes f3 and really hurt white's structure there because, I mean, let's say white encouraged it with h3. I would just take that, and then we have these double pawns here and an isolated pawn on d3, and the pawn structure is very bad for white, even though you'll hear a lot of strong players say two bishops, two bishops, two bishops. Pawn structure also matters, and I don't think white's justified here with the weakening of his pawn structure. So anyway, white played logically here, bishop to g2, pawn to c6, fortifying the center, also really attempting to kill the bishop on g2, which I think is a very strong setup here. Castle, knight to d7. I think knight to d7 is okay. Also, black could have castled there. I think what Sam's trying to avoid was he didn't necessarily want this knight to come into e5 and maybe harass the bishop on g4. So knight to d7 is perfectly sensible. Bishop to d2. Again, I mean, that's a little bit generic, I mean, in my opinion. I mean, black is playing very logically. I think the pieces are sort of in their prime positions. Maybe there could be an argument made about the bishop on e7 possibly being on d6, but I think that black's pieces are in their normal squares. Bishop to d2, I don't really like that because it develops the bishop, but I don't really feel like it develops the bishop with purpose. To me, I think bishop to f4 is logical. Also, bishop to e3 is somewhat logical. A little bit unnatural, the move bishop to e3. It blocks the e-pawn, let's say. It is, there could be some fork action on these two pieces, but there wouldn't be immediately. But bishop to d2 I don't think is really active enough, and considering that white gave up the center, I think he needs to keep the rest of his pieces active. If I was playing white here, I'd be looking to try to go e4. And that seems to be the only positive break in the position for white. So I'd be looking to go e4. And in fact, I mean, I would even consider that right now. I mean, it's an interesting possibility. It does, it does weaken the structure a little bit because this d pawn, I'm not sure what's going on with that d pawn. But I think it's a wise thing to do to counterattack and use that central majority to the good. A long-term plan in this position is the so-called minority attack, where these two pawns could advance up the board and chip away at this pawn structure. But black is very well developed, and it's going to be hard to do that. At any moment, it looks like white is prepared to go b4 and b5. Black could also, black could also halt that idea by playing a5. So bishop to d2, not my favorite move, let's say. Castle, rook to c1, sensible moves, but it's sort of it's hard to see what white's plan is other than just logical development. And I think you need to have a plan in these sort of sterile positions. I think for black, the plan is basically what Sam did in this game. I mean, attack down the e-file and use the active pieces, use the center control and the active pieces to create some havoc. So rook e8, sensible move. Queen to b3, knight to c5. Yeah, I mean, it could have been a waste of time to move queen to b3. Also, queen b3, I mean, quite often in these structures can just be met by queen to b6. And that sort of neutralizes any activity on the queen side. So knight c5. Again, I think I would have tried to go e4 here if I was white, because I don't really see any other productive move. or plan. I mean, the central majority needs to be put to use by white, and it's very hard to execute the minority attack here. Because again, if you go a3 to try to do that, I'll go a5, and it's not very easy at all to get that going. So, okay. Queen to b3, knight c5, queen must go back, bishop to d6, clearing the way for the rook to go in the position, rook to e1, passive, but it's a move. Queen b6. I think that's not a great move by Sam. I think that was everything else I thought was very logical, and I mean I wouldn't have done much differently, let's say. I don't like the move queen b6 because I don't actually see what the queen on b6 is doing. I mean, I know it connects the rooks, but I think the queen on b6 is actually a little bit exposed. I mean, it could later be exposed to a move like knight a4. What happened in the game was bishop to e3 and a little bit exposed on that diagonal. So instead, I think it's quite possible queen to d7 is a reasonable move, and try to maybe play bishop to h3, gaining some activity on the king's side, trying to eliminate the fianchettoed bishop. And yeah, I mean, I think even here, a move like knight e6, getting the the knight off of c5. I'm not sure how good the knight is on c5. So so queen b6. Now here Phil played bishop to e3. But as mentioned earlier, I think one possible plan in this position is the so-called minority attack with b4 and b5, and try to create some open files on the queen side, because you can see that white doesn't really have a lot of action in this position, no real open files, and white needs to sort of think about how he's going to create some files and activity for his major pieces. And I think this might even be a good opportunity to go ahead and do that, because queen cannot take on b4. Well, I mean, it could, but then after knight takes d5, there's a discovery here, and all of white's pieces are now open up. Like this knight is very active. It can capture on f6, destroying the pawns. There's an attack on the queen. The c file has opened up. The b file has opened up. White surely has some activity there. And then maybe after something like knight to e6, bishop to I'm not sure about bishop to e3. Maybe here knight to a4. Yeah, and again, white's looking to gain activity on the queen side, and he was able to advance his minority with tempo. And so in these type of situations, when you're playing one side or the other, let's say white, you know that you need to execute some form of plan. And if, like, let's say the minority attack, which is very common in this structure, is the plan you want to execute, look to see if you can do so tactically. And here it looks like b4 would get the ball rolling pretty quickly and with tempo. So I really like that move. But okay, bishop to e3 tries to take advantage of the queen's placement there. Knight a4 is a big threat here, attacking the pin piece many times. So Sam said, no, I got to get out of there. Queen back to d8. So sort of funky, black's last two moves, queen b6, and then queen back to d8, sort of an admission of a mistake there, and rightfully so. I mean, it was a mistake. You have to get off of that diagonal and get out of there. Okay, bishop to d4. Again, to me, it seems like he should really be going b4, b5, and try to create activity using that minority attack. Okay, so bishop to d4 and knight e6, good move, attacking the bishop there. And now options are limited, because here, if you want to save your bishop, but if you go bishop to e3, you can see that, again, there's always this tactical idea of forking here. And when you see those ideas in your games, even if they don't really work at the moment, it's very important for you to see how could you make them work. And here I think there's a relatively simple way we could make that fork work. And if you want to pause your videos, I'll just pause here for 5 seconds and try to find out how to win a piece here. So yeah, hopefully you found bishop captures f3, and well, you just took a piece, so white should react by capturing back, but either capturing with the pawn or capturing with the bishop would allow pawn to d4, forking the bishop on e3. So Sam's forcing play here. So the bishop took on f6 instead of backing up. The queen took, but now you can sense that black's pieces are much better placed than white's. I mean, whites have not made it past the third rank, not a single piece. Black has very active minor pieces. The queen is much more active. The rook has more scope, let's say, on the e-file than its counterpart. So black is doing well here. And then already this is a mistake, and there was already a positional threat here. For example, well, you'll see it happen in the game, although here white encouraged it by playing h3. This d4 square is fragile to the knight because it would attack the queen on f3. The queen on c2 and a piece on f3. So let's say, well, you'll see what happened in the game. So h3 happened, and then black happily took on f3 because there's no good recapture here for white. Of course, the natural recapture is to take with the bishop, keeping your pawn structure intact, but after knight to d4, this already loses material because I'm forking your bishop and the queen, and let's say you want to indirectly guard the bishop by retreating your queen to d1. The problem here is that I have a little deflection tactic. So knight takes f3, pawn takes, and then rook takes rook check, where after the queen takes, the pawn on f3 hangs. So that was a tactical threat in the position already, and then white encouraged it. I mean, I think that, again, any other move, even like a4, still, I think we would play the same thing. We'd just willingly take on f3 and then go knight to d4. So this was probably a good moment for white to move their queen, being that that's this tactical nuance or tactical problem in the position. And maybe something like queen to d2, because queen b3 does not work, or maybe queen a5 or a4 attacking the bishop here. So, but yeah, I think after h3, basically the position collapses here. And yeah, I mean, again, this fork happens, and there's not an exactly great way to protect here. We saw the exchange here, and then queen out to a4, but here black's winning a very critical kingside pawn, and white's sort of chasing after a pawn on a7 that's not really in the mix right now. It's not really contributing to the position in any way. My feeling is that white should have gone queen to d1 and just try to guard the pawn, and then possibly on the next turn go f4, getting that pawn off of out of f3 and opening up the bishop, and just sort of trying to hold down the fort a bit. And that's good advice to people. I would say in difficult situations like this, don't completely freak out. Don't feel the need to have to lash out or really go for complications. Here, I think white's best bet, I think that was an okay move, because again, if you go queen to d1 immediately, I can deflect your queen away from the f pawn by just taking your rook. So I think this is okay. And then I think Phil needed to go queen to d1 and guard the pawn, and then on the next turn try to go f4. I still think white is not doing well here, but at least white can hope to just keep the material even and then hope to survive. Okay, but white started chasing after these queenside pawns, and what he's really doing to himself is putting his pieces out of play. So knight takes f3, winning a pawn. And after the bishop takes, also severely damaging the king side here, because it's not safe over there. Queen takes a7. Here Sam played h6. I mean, he could have played queen takes g3. queen he wants to move his rook, but he doesn't want to have to. He doesn't want to have to deal with back rank issues. So h6 is good. I misspoke. There's a position where, right, the bishop is on c5, and here the threat is queen takes g3, and we have this pin along the f pawn. It's a sort of common trick. So, of course, we're also attacking the f pawn. So white played rook to f1, and here Sam could have played queen takes g3, and there was nothing wrong with that. He actually played a very aesthetically pleasing move. I don't think it was the best move, because I think here I believe there's a forced checkmate starting with the move bishop takes f2. And the idea is, if the rook captures, rook e1 check, and when the king moves, we have rook h1 or queen h1 checkmate. And if you don't take my bishop, then after this, for example, this looks like a pretty basic checkmating pattern here. Queen takes g3, king to h1, queen takes h3 is checkmate. So I think that would have been the best. He played rook to e1, which is a very clever looking move here, because he's trying to deflect the rook from the protection of the f pawn. So I like that. I think it's a cool move. Not necessarily the most efficient. It takes a little bit longer to win, but it does win. And nice little move there. Shows some imagination. Queen takes f2 check, and we're taking everything with check, and finally a checkmate. So I liked this game by Sam, and I decided to show it because I thought he just played well. I don't think he really did anything. If I could backtrack, I would say that the only real mistake I would consider sort of dubious move is queen to b6, because he lost some time with playing the move queen b6. But otherwise, I thought he played a very, very good game, a very, very meaningful moves and logical moves, and he won the game. So it just goes to show you that sensible developing moves can put your pieces in ideal situations so when things start to go down tactically, your pieces are all in play. And I don't think white ever got a grip on the position, because there wasn't a lot of space for white in the position, and also so that affected the piece activity. There wasn't a lot of activity for the white pieces. And again, if we go back to the opening, I think a big lesson to learn for everyone watching is maintaining pawn tension in the opening and in general. I think here it does not benefit white to capture the pawn because, well, one, it frees black's bishop, but also without pressure in the center of the board, at least in the opening phase, it's very hard to get any advantage for white. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I hope you like that, and we'll be back with more videos.